We have fire. It's burning down pretty good now. Just wasted all this time and effort. Let's give this another shot. Hello, welcome back to another episode from Pale Horse Survival and Tactical. I'm Bill, glad you could join me. Today we're going to take a look at oral hygiene. Welcome back, stay tuned. Oral hygiene is something that's not discussed very often in a long-term wilderness living / survival scenario. It's something that's very important. A bad tooth can take you out of commission very fast. The infection can actually kill you. I know somebody personally who had to have a heart valve replaced because of a tooth infection. The infection spread from the tooth, became systemic. In other words, it'll spread through the blood, and one of the common places that it'll go is the heart. And it can spread to other places as well, go to the brain if you have a bad abscess. So oral hygiene is very, very important. It's something that's not really discussed, and I wanted to take a little bit of time to go over a few things. Keeping your teeth clean in a primitive situation is a little bit easier said than done. If you don't have the aid of, say, dental floss, a toothbrush, toothpaste, the modern conveniences. As far as primitive floss would go, I've tried pine needles, green pine needles. They don't work. You try to get them between your teeth, they'll break. You could use sinew, yucca fibers, things of that nature. There's other plant fibers that are tough enough to work, however they're not readily available to everybody. Yucca doesn't grow everywhere, and sinew isn't readily available unless you harvest an animal, so that's not exactly feasible. So the idea that I came up with, just take a stick. What I did with the stick, I whittled one end. And if you do this, make sure it's a non-toxic wood. This is off of a piece of pine. You don't want to use like poison ivy or poison oak or something like that, obviously, or anything that's poisonous. So it's up to you to make sure that you have a non-toxic wood. Pine is readily available, and it does have some antibacterial properties in the wood and the sap. Pinene being one of them. So anyway, it's just a little twig here. I carved one end into a sharp point, kind of like a toothpick. The other side I carved into a spade shape. What this could be used for, now you could always use a fingernail. Get in there with a fingernail and remove plaque and whatnot. But in a primitive situation, you don't really want to transfer bacteria into your mouth that way. Then you might wind up with a throat infection or who knows what. So I did shoot a video, the first video of the primitive hygiene series. I showed how to produce tannic water, which is antibacterial. You can use that to wash your hands. You can also use white campfire ash, which contains a high level of lye. Put a little water on your hands, scoop up some the white cool, of course, not hot, campfire ash, and just scrub your hands down and then rinse them off to cut the bacteria. So that's a good way to wash up, and I'm going to be doing a video on that here in a little bit. Uses for charcoal and the white ash out of the campfire. But this would be a good little dental hygiene tool. And if you're in the woods, they're basically all over the place, or anywhere there's trees, or even a non-toxic bush or a shrub. You just harvest yourself. It could be dead. This one was dead. I just picked it up off the ground. Or you could use a green one. The dead ones are going to be dry and they're going to be a little more stiff. Green ones will be a little more pliable, so I think I'd go with something like this. But you could work this pointed end just underneath the gum line of your teeth. Work it along. You could get it in between the tooth, down into the pockets, and in between, and just kind of scrape and work your way along. And then once you go around the outside, come back and work the insides. And just try and be as thorough as you can. And then the spade part of it here you can use on the flat surfaces of the teeth. And just kind of work it down just as you would a fingernail. And the nice thing with this is you're not transferring any bacteria into your mouth from your fingernails. And you can just work it down the flat of your teeth, and then on the inside. And there's no need to keep them once you're done. Just discard it, and when you're ready to clean your teeth again, after a meal or the next morning or whatever, just harvest yourself up another twig. And it only takes a few seconds of whittling to work it into a usable tool. The tannic water, which as I mentioned just a bit ago, the first video that I shot in the Primitive Hygiene series, the tannic water is highly antibacterial, antifungal. It makes a good mouthwash and a gargle. And I'll include a link to that video in the description box below. But you can go ahead after cleaning your teeth with your improvised dental pick and tool. You can go back and swish your mouth out really good with a fairly strong solution of tannic water to kill the bacteria. So dental hygiene is something that's very important in a long-term situation. If you develop an abscess, it's not a good thing. It's going to be nearly impossible to treat in a primitive situation. An extraction is possible. Say you get a tooth that goes bad, it's hurting really super bad, and you're in a primitive situation. Well, if you have a multi-tool, you have a pair of pliers on there, it's not pleasant to talk about, but it's survival. You do what you got to do. You may have to grab a hold of that tooth, and you may have to attempt to extract it. I'm not going to go into how to extract a tooth. You can do. I may shoot a video down the road. I'm not going to demonstrate it, obviously, but go over the procedure. But that's a judgment call on your part. If you're ever in a situation like that, I know personally, I've had toothaches that were unbelievably painful. It's probably a bad toothache is probably one of the worst pains that you can experience. I mean, there's a lot of pains out there. I'm sure there's women out there saying, "Well, childbirth, you know, hey, I don't doubt that in the least." But I know personally, I've had some very bad toothaches that were unbelievably painful. So the best thing is to exercise some good hygiene. And the nice thing is, in a primitive situation, you're not going to be eating junk food. And a lot of cavities and tooth issues are caused by processed foods, the sugar additives, candy, soda pop, things of that nature. So you know, you look at, you dig into history, and primitive man, cavemen, primitive peoples, even today in like parts of the remote jungles of South America, some of these tribes that down in the Amazon and whatnot, that have never even had contact, or almost no contact, with outside people, or maybe only recently have had contact, so they go in and they do documentaries on these people and everything, but most of the time they got great teeth. And they use primitive plants, they use primitive tools to clean their teeth, but they're not exposed to the processed foods and the manufactured sugars and things of that nature. So, but you look at the skulls of some of these ancient people that archaeologists dig up, and oftentimes they got great teeth. There'll be some tartar buildup, but usually they have a full set of teeth, and the teeth that they do have is in pretty good shape. So as modern people, it's our diets that are really bad. So getting back to primitive living, if you're in a long-term primitive living scenario, you're going to be eating organic matter, plants, edibles, and animals, meat. So it's basically a paleo diet, and whatever roots that you can forage. And so really it's a pretty healthy way to go, and it's pretty tooth friendly. There's not a lot there that is going to attack your teeth. Soda pop, for instance, is really caustic. You know, probably everybody knows you can pour Coca-Cola or Pepsi on a rusted bolt, and it will actually dissolve the rust off the stuff. So God knows what it does to the insides of everybody who ingests that stuff, and not to mention the diabetes that it causes. But I'm getting off topic now. One other thing I wanted to mention too, if you do develop a cavity, and I've discovered a few of my own cavities when I was flossing. You know, the floss will hang up on a section of tooth, or it'll tear, and it's like, uh-oh. You go and you talk to your dentist, hey, you know, I think I found something. They check, and they go, oh yeah, you got a cavity. So then next thing you're getting a cavity filled. But if you run across a cavity, you know, you're running your tongue around and doing a self-diagnostic, you run across a cavity on a tooth, and you know it's a cavity, you're in a long-term wilderness living scenario, and you know you're going to be there a long time, you have a choice. The cavity's not going to get better, it's only going to get worse. And you have a choice. You could either try to take that tooth out while it's still solid, because if you wait, that cavity is going to eat its way into the tooth. The tooth is going to begin to break off. There's going to be pieces. You're just going to be eating something and a chunk of tooth is going to come out. Ask me how I know. I've had that happen, and I actually lost 4 teeth. And I lost 4 teeth due to high fructose corn syrup. Stuff's absolute poison. And I'm going to get a little bit off topic here, but just kind of a quick rundown. I was making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches that I would take on my lunch quite a few years ago, because I used to go through drive-thrus on my lunch breaks, and I would get fast food. And this is before I changed my whole diet around and began to awaken to a lot of the poisons and stuff that are in the foods and the toxins. And so anyways, as I was getting away from that, I had a brainstorm, and I thought, well, I'll just go ahead and I'll make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. So I got organic peanut butter and jelly, and I thought, well, this has got to be healthy, right? I did that for about a year and developed cavities, about 11 cavities to be precise. And I had a couple of cavities that developed between some upper molars, and they didn't really hurt, and I didn't get them addressed in time, and the teeth wound up breaking. I lost half a tooth, and by the time I did go in, and there wasn't a lot of tooth left. So what I'm trying to say is, if you have a cavity, you're in a long-term wilderness living situation. You have a cavity and you know it's there. If you wait, it's going to eat that tooth up, and what's going to happen is eventually that tooth is going to break off at the gum line. There's only going to be the little jagged shards sticking out of your gum. Ask me how I know. I've already been through this. In a primitive situation, how are you going to get that tooth out? There's nothing there to grab, and that requires dental intervention to get that out of there. And it's not something you're going to be able to handle out in the bush, unless you're lucky enough and you have a dentist along with you and your bug out party or somebody with the proper tools. But still, that's problematical. It really is. So what I'm saying is, if you develop a cavity, you have one, you know it's there, you have a choice to make. You could either address that in the short term while the tooth is still solid before that cavity tunnels in and hollows that tooth out, and you wind up with this brittle shell that's going to break. If you try to extract it with a pair of pliers or multi-tool or whatever, you grasp it, it's going to break, snaps off up at the gum, now you're screwed. What's going to happen is it's probably going to get infected. That's what happened with mine, with those jagged pieces and the pieces of the root sticking out of the gum. You know, I've heard stories where the gum will grow over that, you know, but you know, again, it's all problematical. So it's a judgment call on your part. And me personally, what I would do, since I've already lived through that and lost 4 teeth, which the high fructose corn syrup was in the jelly. I didn't know that until after I developed cavities, decided to read the label, and I go, oh crap, there's high fructose corn syrup in there. The stuff's absolute poison on teeth. I was amazed at how quick it caused problems. So, and as a result, I won't eat any of the processed jellies or anything that has high fructose corn syrup in it. I avoid it like the plague. But what I would do, if I was in a long-term bug out scenario, grid down scenario, collapse, monetary collapse, whatever the situation is, and you know, I know I'm going to be living for years maybe in a primitive situation without access to medical care. If I developed another cavity, I know it's there, I'm probably going to get rid of the tooth myself. So that's just my personal plan of action of what I would do. I wouldn't wait around until a problem developed into a lot bigger problem, very possibly a life-threatening problem. So anyways, make yourself a little dental pick and just try to be as thorough as you can. Go around each tooth, go around the outside, go into the in between, get up into the pocket the best you can, and work your way all the way around the outside on your upper set, then back underneath, and then work your bottom. It's a nice little activity to do after a primitive wilderness meal. Maybe you had a squirrel or some fish for dinner or whatever, and some wild edibles, and you're kicking back around your warm fire. You bust out your improvised dental cleaning tool and spend a little time, half hour or so, on your teeth, and get everything cleaned up. And give it a nice swish and a gargle with some tannic water, kill any bacteria. I do that a couple times a day, and to keep the oral bacteria knocked down. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I did making it. Please like, subscribe, and share, and I will see all of you very soon on the next one. Everybody take care. Bye-bye.